I'm John Anderson. I'm the Chief Investment Officer at Imperial College London. And therefore, I've had this extraordinary opportunity to see our own local ecosystem grow. But I think actually now, as we get more mature, as we get more established, and we maybe more fully understand the environment we're operating in, we're starting to now bring in some really exciting investors. And indeed, I think we've got you down as a startup. But I think with your raise, that's probably a little unfair. I think
Series A.
Series A. And of course, this is what a EdTech startup looks 3 years after the seed round. So I would get in the queue if I were you for other things emerging from the EdTech lab. I'll briefly allow the panel to introduce themselves. We've got one or two initial questions, which hopefully will get the conversation going. But clearly, we want to make as much time as possible for questions from the audience. And I'm assuming we have the ability to get those questions in. So please.
Hi, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. Well, I start always introduction. I'm a scientist by training. I did PhD and postdoc at Cambridge in protein folding, drug discovery, working with biologics in a big pharma, and moved a couple of years ago to investment. So I joined Parkwalk. We are EAS Evergreen Fund, been around for over 10 years, invest in UK academic spin-outs. We invested over $500 million. Till now, we have 180 companies in the portfolio. We are sector agnostic, but like 1/3 of the portfolio is in life sciences, where I really sit in. And we usually come around seed, and then we follow towards, I guess, a true Series A to Series B. That's me.
Dinika.
Hi, everyone. A real pleasure to be in a room full of scientists. It gives me a lot of energy. I'm not a scientist. I'm a venture capitalist, an early stage venture capitalist. I run and am part of the partnership of a fund called Cherry Ventures. We're a European fund. We're generalist in our investing approach, and we invest from pre-seed to Series A, so early stage investor. We tend to lead rounds at the early stage. What does that mean? We take board seats. We don't work with many companies. So out of the 300 entrepreneurs I would speak to in a year, I would invest in, say, 3 of them. So we are a high conviction investor. What that means is we tend to have a real thesis on a team and a space, and the combination of the two is how we tend to invest. We invest mainly in technology companies. That does include some biotech over time. We've invested in 2 biotech startups and 1 tech bio. We can get into the difference slightly later. But we're working today out of an early stage fund that's 370 million euros.
Mathhieu.
Hi, everyone. Matt here. I'm an investment manager at Octopus Ventures. So we're a generalist fund as well, but we specialize in certain teams. So I'm in the health team specifically. I personally don't invest in therapeutics, so I don't know how relevant I can be to that many of you. But on the health software, clinical AI, large AI, new diagnostics, multimodal AI and imaging, and other ways to help identify and treat certain disease areas. That's the world I operate in. We invest typically from seed to Series B, so we can lead seed rounds, we can lead Series Bs as well, but sweet spot is more Series A. Similar to you, we'll tend to lead rounds, sit on the boards, and support the founders as much as they want us to. And I think that sums it up. We typically invest in businesses with a UK angle, so either staff here in the UK or commercial traction here in the UK. But we've made some exceptions in the past.
And Robin, we've moved the entire chemistry department here so you could come back to chemistry. So
okay. All right, that's my intro. I'm an Imperial chemistry graduate, so it doesn't take much for me to want to come back, because I think it was been incredibly important in my career, so it's just great to be here. If I can help any of you guys, fantastic. I'm a medicinal chemist. I joined Myricx 5 years ago. It was going to be a hobby project. I was sure that we had some candidate quality compounds in the pot from one of the founders, and I'd have some fun for 18 months and I'd retire. 5 years on, this is my 4th role. I'm now the CEO, so I'm carrying the baton, but I will hand the baton on. And we, a lot of changes. Not a linear path. We started off a small molecule. I think we got very close to raising money for the clinic, but actually we'd have to ask the investors that didn't invest whether we got close. And then we pivoted. And we pivoted to ADCs. So Daniel did a very clear introduction about why that's a timely thing to do. And actually pivoting is an interesting experience. Some people say it's a wise and easy thing to do. Other people say it's really hard because you're asking your investors to essentially write off what they believed in. And if they believed in your first story and it didn't work, why should they believe in your second story? And we were experts in our first story and we didn't succeed. And we knew diddly squat about our second story. So why should they invest in us? So it's been a fantastic experience, very humbling. And I think the main lesson for me is the more time you can network and listen and speak to smart people, amazing how generous they are. And people do want to help you. If you're trying to do something novel and innovative, if they believe you're trying to help patients, my goodness, they will phone you up on a Friday evening. They will give you their time. So, happy to try and share that. But today, Series A, we raised £90 million mid last year. It was the largest Series A from a European academic spin-out. That's fantastic. But some big investors came in with big expectations. It's transformed the company, but we're on track to get IND and into the clinic 2027. 2026, sorry, that's 2026.
Can't remember which number you were underwriting to.
That's me.
Thank you. Dinika, you noted TechBio, biotech. And I guess the whole venture capital industry, we jump on phrases, on small combinations of words. But what is that fundamental difference between TechBio and biotech? And where might people, is it clear where a opportunity is within those two ranges, or do you think people can choose between the two, and what might they think about in making that choice?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'd love your insights as well. Maybe I'll get back to something really boring before getting into the interesting part of the answer, which is our fund model, which is, so as a fund manager, my duty is to return capital to my investors within ideally a 10-year period. Therefore, what that means is I'm looking to invest in humans and in people that are likely to take a nascent idea and ideally turn that into a company and turn that into a very big company in a very short period of time. That is extremely hard to do. Like the data shows, right? There's 1% of companies that will achieve that. And so our job is hard. It's by any measure. And so the small nuance between tech bio and biotech comes down to speed. And typically what we've seen historically about the speed of outcomes. And there's a new nuance to that, which is the incorporation of AI into understanding what used to be very long cycles in things like drug discovery, new material discovery. And speed is a very core important thing that we're trying to test for when we invest in a company. And therefore, I think that is the largest differentiator in the way I assess a tech bio or a biotech, as well as the amount of capital that each one of these businesses may require over 10 years. And one could be $1 billion of capital, and one might be 30 million. Now, of course, there's everything in between, right? So very successful company, Oaken, call themselves a biotech, AI-enabled company, incredibly successful business, and in probably a scale that's very much acceptable to a venture capital fund. So I think it's obviously not binary. Yeah.
And Karolina, you look at particularly university startup opportunities, and you're more generous. So are you seeing this distinction, and which direction are you tending to deploy your capital?
Sure. So in terms of like tech bio, for me personally, it's more about like outcome and what you are getting, because at the end of the day, you have machine learning / platform that or like a magic box that you are using. So it's at the end of the day, it's a tool that you are using, and then like you can use it different ways. And you know, one company that I'm on the board, they are using that platform to identify novel targets. But then how you value that business, essentially you value that business based on the targets that they are, you know, like developing the therapy. So for me, it's still like, it's different biotech, but at the end of the day, it's drug discovery. We have to check like therapeutic indication and the targets if we are in the modalities and if we are interested. As a fund, going back to the fund, so we tend to, as I mentioned earlier, we are quite broad in terms of the life sciences. So I'm on the board of a company that very early stage that they do essentially it's like single asset antibody. They have like 3 different antibodies. One, now they're raising Series A, one for like getting 1 to IND, and 2 other antibodies that are sort of like a backup plan. Or, as I mentioned earlier, it will be a platform, drug discovery platform for like target discovery. So probably like our preference will be like to look into like the platforms and pharma co-development and de-risking, but again, we're quite broad depending on opportunity, good science, scientists, and potential of the business.
Robin, I guess your raise suggests you're biotech rather than tech bio, quantum.
Well, and our timelines.
Yeah, and your timelines. But I guess are you seeing that therefore pushing you into a more obvious subset of early stage and later stage investors?
Yeah, I mean, I've been at 2 biotechs. The first biotech was Aztecs, and that's done very well and is well known now. And I think both of those companies were spun out of very deep scientific roots, from Cambridge, from Imperial. And that, without me knowing at the time, actually gave us probably a sort of an unfair advantage or an advantage in that the founders were very credible, they were very well known, they had a network, you know, they sat on many grant reviews, they sat on medium, mid-sized pharma SABs. So we were able to go to sort of household, quite large investors that typically said, well, we're speaking to you because we like your science. We don't normally invest in such early companies. So it's always like haunted me. What happens if you've got a great idea, but you don't have that sort of, that legacy? And I think that bridge is tough. And when they meet some young researchers, they say, look, you know, I need another 4 years data before I can really get to that caliber of investor, but I can only get money for the next year. So that's how we've gone. I think, you know, we've been very fortunate with Myricx. I think the idea that Ed Tate worked on, he collaborated with an extraordinarily successful medicinal chemist from Pfizer that just thought, I'm not going to move to the States, I'm going to move to Imperial, I'm going to work on this target. So he generated industrial quality leads, and it just so happened a good friend of mine thought, I'm done with big pharma, I'm going to go to Imperial and have some fun. And he knew how to put companies together because he was a founder in Aztecs and other companies. So it's like a collision of several things, and I feel super, super lucky, and I hope the team does justice to that. But how you create that luck and how you play the odds, I think is, you know, really, really thought-provoking, because I think we've been very fortunate.
But perhaps your example is evidence that the ecosystem is maturing and you are getting those serial founders, and C-suite teams that know how to grow a venture-scale organisation.
So I won't bore you with the specifics of the target Myricx works on unless any of you show me any interest. But it was a target the world has known for decades. People thought it'd be great as an antifungal. People thought it'd be great as an antiviral. People thought it'd be good for third world parasitic disease, and the answer is it wasn't. So there was a huge well of scientific knowledge. So we got lucky that we re-engineered it. So I think being in a major institute with those connectivities is a huge, huge, huge advantage. And that's what I saw with Aztecs as well, that it was multiple academics from Cambridge. So try and use gravity. Try not to do it all on your own. Be humble. Try and bring others in. Even if you give stuff up, like, you know, another founder joins or you give up some equity. Because, you know, you need that momentum. And that's what I hear a lot from VCs. They're looking for momentum. Is this team agile? Are they smart? Will they cluster? Will they bring things in? So, yeah, lots of stuff.
Matt, I mean, you broaden into healthcare as well. So how are you seeing this biotech space?
Yeah, so I don't do any biotech, so I can't comment too much on that. But the tech bio side, essentially I see it as the underlying tools, be it machine learning, AI, data security, privacy, something that can feed into the chemical or biological process to help get some new drugs or diagnostics to market. So it's actually mega broad. It's a huge field. The particularities of it is that investors will look at a bit more like software-ish metrics at different stages, so seed, Series A, and so on. So people will be looking for early customers, even how much it costs you to acquire those customers, deployment, downtimes, efficiency. So you can be put pretty quickly in a bucket, which investors are really demanding because they want both scientific breakthroughs and also they want to see potential of scale pretty early on. Which is nice, which is why it's not easy. It's not an easy space to raise for. But one thing that you said is that cuts across every company is that some companies we invested in at very early stage, the founders, even if they were like 19 and still in university, they found a way to get an advisory board, which is stellar. I don't know how they do it. When I was 19, I didn't know what I was doing. But like and then you look at their pitch deck and you're like, wow, you're still at university and you have these 3 people that are advising you. It's like, how are you such a magnet? And that will, that will start from pre-seed to then Series A and then Series B and so on. So
I think it's because the IP emerged in the labs of the advisory board, but they didn't want to go through the TTO. I think that's how it happened. But we're recording this and re-recording it before it goes out. Sorry. A softball question now, something simple. What do startups need to do to succeed? And I guess what's quite interesting is if you are in that deep tech space, if you are taking ideas and concepts that maybe have been in the literature for years, but certainly have been in and through the academic lab, how do you reach in and ensure that you're getting the proof of concept around that IP? How do you make sure that you're there bringing the right seed investors? Are you a venture growth organization? Do you understand the challenges of being venture-backed? And then how do you push that through so that you actually get both the impact of the opportunity, but obviously the returns that that venture community are looking for? And Robert, I think you've been very clear so far around your pivoting, but is there anything you can add around that journey and how we systemize it, how we can make it more replicable?
Blimey, I hope you weren't going to answer me, so I was tuning out. I think you've got to have really strong differentiation. It doesn't matter how early you are, how little data you have, the story has to be compelling. You can have loads of data gaps, you can have some issues, right? You don't have to be perfect, but you have to be really differentiated rather than, look, we're going to beat the other 76 people, So differentiation and be very respectful and understand the people you're speaking to. They see a lot. So try and understand who's going to be the last person that's spoken to them about the same subject. What might they have liked, what might they not have liked? So try and understand what the investors are looking for. Don't tell them what you're doing. Tell them where you will be when you cross the finishing line. So output rather than input. And it's amazing how boring VCs think scientists are. I mean, after our seed investor invested, they said, for God's sake, just cut that out. Come on, So I'm joking, but story, high-level story, differentiation.
And Dinika, you meet 300, cut 297. So what are you using? What is your process to make those really difficult decisions out of that broad opportunity set?
Yeah, I mean, like a part of the perfect answer here is you need to understand whether you will ever communicate that you're willing to settle for 50 million exit or 100 million exit. And if that's all, if that's something that I can suss in your conversation with me, then it's already a failed conversation. It's the truth, though. I think, ultimately, and every fund is different. I think what we're looking for are exceptional ideas and exceptional people and a founder market fit that's unavoidable. So why you? Like, you have to keep asking yourself, like, why you? Why am I the best person to be building against this idea? And if you have that crystallized and you know how to communicate that well, that's half of the that's half the journey, really, because then a VC very clearly knows what they're underwriting. They're underwriting you at the early stage, and then they're underwriting why you are the best person to be taking an idea post R&D, post research stage, and then into commercialization.
Matt, I mean, I was recently diligencing a New York firm, where in America diligencing is a verb, and they spoke about the venture growth mindset, and therefore actually how they were going through their opportunity set, and they really were looking for something in the founding team which was about that exponential growth, anticipation and expectation and commitment. Is that something you're looking through, when especially now you're focusing in on that kind of UK opportunity set?
Yeah, I think what's rare is for entrepreneurs to have both, this crazy vision to drastically change like the world for the better, and sometimes it comes from personal experience. Like they're not going to stop until it works, and that's more of a personal thing. It's a feeling you have in a meeting, but then if it stops there, it's almost not enough in the sense that you also. The growth mindset has to come from, growth, and for that, it's not just saying we're going after this big TAM. It's saying, okay, we understand fundamentally our potential customers, and we understand the buyers, the value proposition, the economics of these buyers, and then you can have the big vision, but you understand bottom up kind of how you're going to get there. Sometimes there's kind of like a missing link there. So for early stage, I think it's the most useful thing is to really get a good understanding of like who's going to buy it and why, and what are the buyer incentives, especially for tech bio. Is it a cost saving, revenue opportunity? And then if you have those two things, then I think it kind of goes into the venture growth mindset that we expect from, certainly we have as investors, but we have from the founders as well.
And Karolina, I have something quite specific for you, because you are the most prolific investor in UK university spin-outs. So presumably you have more experience than anybody else on dealing with the tech transfer office and engaging with the process of successfully moving the IP out of the lab and into the startup and into the scale-up community. So are there lessons you can give to people around how that can and should be effective?
Wow. And I thought I got the tough question.
So the audience are coming in a moment. So
it's a very good question, Joe. Thank you very much. I think it's, unfortunately or fortunately, I think it depends on like a TTO. I think like some technology transfer offices, it's a really big task, because it's not like it's just about spinning up. Like as a TTO, you are also like dealing with all the licensing and and then collaboration with potentially pharma. So it is like, we are talking about like the spin out process, and I actually believe that some of those technologies, not necessarily they're actually like they're right for the spin out, because you could actually, it's about the balancing act. If you have the right team with the right energy to actually go and build a business, or maybe it's a better balance to actually like think about out licensing of the technology. And then in the UK, in this country, again, some of the TTOs are much bigger, so you have more people, you have much more experienced teams that actually done it for multiple years. So actually, they know investors community, they can help you with the introduction, they even maybe like they can pre-syndicate and help you with that stage. And not necessarily all of them like that, because like some of them, they are like much smaller and they don't have that network, they don't have that that sort of like expertise. So I think that this is the real challenge. And then it's going back to, like as a TTO, what's your response, like how much you can help. And then like with my investment hat on, it's going back to the individual. It's going back to the, great technology coming out from the top universities. But at the end of the day, it's willingness from scientific funders to go out there and raise capital. And then it's sort of like, again, negotiation with like who is getting what stake of equity for X involvement of years of IP. But I think it's like last year was like this like government report with some sort of guidance of like what would be the starting point for negotiation with the TTO if you are spinning out the company. And again, it's sort of like to help scientists to kind of like start that conversation. And unfortunately, we are still like so behind what's going on in the US. And I think it's like Imperial is a great place because like you have different options. You can go through the TTO and ask them for help with depending on what sort of support they can offer or you need at the time, but also like you can try to raise on your own. And then like so as an individual or a scientist you have choices, I guess. But we are still so behind US, unfortunately.
Thank you. And we'll come to the audience, I think, in just a moment. Just one last question. So, as a mediocre white bloke with a private education, getting into investment seemed obvious and easy. So how do we deal with that across the sector? What have you found in your own experiences in terms of equality of opportunity, both at a gender level and an ethnic minority level? And Matt, maybe I'll come to you first on that one.
That's a white block.
Also mediocre white block. Thank you very much. No, look, it's an important subject. I mean, first is like our investment areas. Do we want to focus there and an intent for businesses that are, for example, more focused on women's health, and which we backed a lot at Octopus actually, and are typically women-led. But the reality is that what we can control is the top of funnel, and we see hundreds and hundreds of decks, and to be aware of our biases when we look at decks. And also to have, as a team, goals to have a certain amount of women-led founders as part of the founding teams in all the pitch decks that we look at. So, we see so many pitch decks that's our role is to make sure we have the right processes in place throughout that and that potentially is our biggest influence we can have. We need to get better at it for sure. But yeah, it's like these little steps that compound after a while.
Dinika, any perspective you can bring?
So I find myself sitting in most board meetings in a room with people who don't look anything like me, so middle-aged white men.
Happy to have invested in you.
No, but all jokes aside, so anecdotally, when looking at the Cherry portfolio across opportunities that we've looked at in the broader healthcare space, those subset of entrepreneurs represent the most diverse of our entire portfolio. Female entrepreneurs, female founders, and people of color. And I don't think it's an accident, right? I look at this room and it's fairly diverse, and I think that the opportunity in healthcare is one where it's fairly meritocracy based. It's less of a world where tech bros can succeed because you have to have depth of knowledge. And so, it's sort of an area where we're committed to keep investing. But actually, I look at our most recent investments in deep tech, so a space technology company based in France, and a microrobotics company trying to detect brain tumors, so a microrobot for the brain, and both of them have female founders. So I think I'm extremely encouraged, more than I've ever been in sort of my 15-plus year career, that I think we're in a really interesting place where in Europe we're seeing incredible entrepreneurs from all walks of life. I think the thing we need to fix is the pedigree question. So, oftentimes we're solving the problem of what people look like, but they all still are educated in the same universities.
Robin, anything you'd like to add?
Not really.
Okay,
fair
enough.
I'm lucky that our CSO is non-British female. Our CEO is female British. Our first clinician was non-European, non-heterosexual. But this was just fortunate. It was just the talent that turned up. Are we doing anything to actually set those foundations? I think that's something we've got to think about. But it's great to hear your optimism. You know, that's great. I mean, we've got to find the best talent because it's really tough.
Yeah.
And Karolina?
Yeah, it's a fair point. You are looking for like the best of the best when you are building the businesses, and it's, you know, it's difficult to develop the therapies and to get to patients. So you want to work with the best of the best. But I think it's like going back to the topic. I think as an industry we are much more conscious and aware of the challenge, and I think it's like as a Parkwalk we monitor how many funders, female funders, or C-level team members we have in the portfolio. But then, like as an industry, so I joined like I think last year, a Bioindustry Association set up this Women in Biotech Advisory Committee, and it's a small group, but we have regular meetings to as an industry to come together with some sort of like a plan or support women in especially in biotech. So I think it's like as an industry we are talking about it, and we are very supportive. So we are in the right place, I guess.
Thank you. Right, so we'll open it up to the audience. Please show hands if you have a question. When you get the question, if you wouldn't mind saying who you are, and if you're directing it to a member of the panel, please be clear. If not, we'll try to cover it in general. So thank you.
Thank you. So Saleh Patel from Constructive Bio. I've got a question actually related to that last discussion point around DEI. You know, in recent weeks we've seen quite a shift in the US with the political landscape in terms of, you know, a lot of DEI programs and initiatives being rolled back. Do you think, you know, given how much influence the investment community has from the US into the broader markets, you know, are we going to see some regression in that space, and, you know, people thinking less about DEI when it does come to setting up their companies and their structures within the UK and Europe? And also actually challenging you as well on the fact that in terms of socioeconomic diversity within especially within the tech space, I think there's been recent data showing that, you know, only 9% of people working in the tech sector come from a low socioeconomic background, and I think that's a huge challenge, especially when we're thinking about innovators who want, you know, very entrepreneurial part of our community and our population, but actually raising that initial capital can be extremely challenging for those types of individuals who don't have the professional networks and don't have the safe financial safety nets that, you know, some more privileged peers would potentially have.
So, yeah, and I'll pass on in a moment, but I think, you know, it's just rational, isn't it? There cannot be that much space in a normal distribution curve. From the kids from St Paul's. You know, there must be a much broader opportunity set, and surely given the network, given the opportunity, given the confidence, you're going to get a better return if you're moving into that market rather than being crowded out and overpaying for those who are coming through with that combination of confidence, social proof, and not necessarily dense knowledge. And you know, hard work is also a quite critical part of this, it feels to me. So I think, yeah, I think there's a real concern about the shift in global politics. But, you know, facts and science is about reality, isn't it? So if you're trying to push something through which is going to be effective in healthcare environments, in clinical environments, it's got to actually work. It can't just be a pitch deck, in my opinion. And I do think Imperial has made significant progress in terms of how it reaches out and enables a broader community to both come into the university, then learn and develop extraordinary knowledge at the university, and then most ideally push it through. The Enterprise Lab's done a really great job around that. But yeah, I'll pass that on to see whether there's a sense that shift in global politics might make things worse rather than better.
I mean, my controversial take is that, yes, I think DEI programs were good for a reason. You know, I was part of one. But I think the truth is the beauty of our industry is that performance matters the most. And actually, I think you see that mostly in US investors and deep-pocketed US investors than anyone else in Europe. And I think that's actually what I admire about the US investor community, in that they tend to be very results-focused and results-oriented, and the most colorblind in my experience. I mean, I can think about my own career, but that's anecdotal. So I think for me, I'm actually not as worried. I think it's a lot of politics and a lot of narrative at play. And I don't actually think that it would impact how venture capitalists think about funding ideas or opportunities. But that might be a controversial take.
Thank you.
Maybe just from
Yep.
a slightly different angle. But as an entrepreneur, I think, like, okay, like we are talking about university spin-outs as not like from one angle, but then like you have like so many accelerators, incubators. So at the end of the day, doesn't matter where you are coming from. If you have like great idea with science or a team, you can join like global accelerator incubators and tap in, because eventually what Robin was saying, eventually you want to really tap into the right network for whatever opportunity like you are building, if it's tech or biotech. So you want to be like around like-minded people and around people that they will help you to raise potential capital. So even like startups from Imperial or Cambridge, they go to Y Combinator or like IndieBio or like global accelerators. That's where you can raise money, you can build your business proposal, and then like you can set up the business wherever you want. You can come back here and build a team here around academics if you wish, or I'm Polish, you can move to Poland or wherever you want, because it's like less expensive to pay for some lab space.
Opportunities in North Acton at a significant discount. We had a question here. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie Noel from Global Counsel. I just wanted to ask, from a venture fund perspective and from a company perspective, what is your latest assessment of the UK as a place to raise capital? Because obviously we know BIA does lots of work on overseas investors, leading rounds, and obviously we have a lack of institutional investment in this country, particularly from UK pension funds, and there's new policies now like British Growth Partnership and Mansion House. So I just wanted to get the latest sense from you. Is there a bit more optimism, or is this a problem that would persist, or is it a problem at all?
Matt, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen recently some good momentum in healthcare and software investments coming out of the UK. The reality is that the founders, I mean, if they raise from a UK fund or a French fund or a German fund, unless some funds are quite restricted regionally, I feel like a lot of founders actually raise from a bunch of different countries, markets that they're operating in. So, I think by deal count, the UK is still like the most active in Europe, and I think followed closely by Germany and France and Italy, Spain catching up. So overall, I think it's still a buzzing ecosystem. Do you get like the Hippocratic AI massive rounds here, at Series A, like low revenue? Probably not. It is a bit of a different game in the US, maybe more high risk, high reward. So I do think in the UK we are, of course, venture capital, but our economics might be a little bit different, what we're looking for compared to the US. That's just my view. So, but overall, like looking at deal count, number of founders, I still think it's a great place to fundraise. And the last 2 years have been pretty tough, actually, for a lot of companies. Like graduation rates, companies getting from Series A, Series B have fallen. Same with seed to A. So it is a tougher fundraising environment, but that's a bit more of a macroeconomic one. It's the same, I think, in the US. So, yeah, overall, like I'm still positive. It's a good place to fundraise.
Dinika, you closed your round recently. Did you see a shift in the geography of your LPs? Are you seeing more enthusiasm for early stage venture from the UK source?
A little bit more, but I would say we've actually seen much more enthusiasm from the US. But in terms of pools of capital, there is, extremely, there's like 100 times more capital in the US, right, than in the UK. No, but I'm extremely enthusiastic, I think, about UK organizations, and I think it will be a long journey for, pension schemes to, be more risk-taking, and for a lot of the structural issues that I think are preventing risk-taking at scale to happen in this country. But I think it doesn't stop the entrepreneur, right? The entrepreneurial spirit in this country is extremely high from sort of everything that we can see. Deal flow, deal count, amounts of capital. You are completely right, though, that there is an influx of American capital, US-based funds that are keen to invest in the UK, and that's a lost opportunity for UK funds, right? Because there's great entrepreneurs and good company creation and actually good businesses. Anecdotally, I was in New York and a VC told me that they've stopped going to San Francisco and rather come to London to find better value for better company rather than very little company but great hype. And I think that's like a good representation of where we are.
And Robin, you've got British Patient Capital on your cap table. That's pretty impressive. So did you find and feel that they were promoting and enabling more risk-taking amongst the investor base that is looking in these areas?
They were very, very helpful for us. I mean, just reflecting on your question, I mean, yes, we went to the US. Yes, we had some great meetings. Yes, I came back really optimistic that we landed it. We didn't actually convert those. And I think there's a learning for me is I didn't go across 3 times in 2 months. I didn't bump into them at the networking meeting on a Thursday evening. So I think it's just like a home away. If for strategic reasons you think you need to bring in US money, you need to do something different. It was my lesson. But I did find British Patient Capital very strategic, very intentional, and they did exactly what they said they'd do. And so did Cancer Research Horizons. Yep. They came in at a time where actually we hadn't closed on the Series A. We didn't want to slow down on some work, and we had a very, very brief conversation. And it translated into something that meant we didn't slow down. So, yeah, I found the UK investment system worked for us. But the people that got us across the line were people that almost invested in us 3 years ago with a small molecule. And actually, they were people that were very courteous to us at the end when they decided not to invest. They actually offered time to tell us what they liked and what the issues were. And so they sort of committed to that relationship. So my learning is relationships. You've got to have early data, early differentiation, but keep committing to those relationships. And the founder of the first company was at Aztecs. They got knocked back so many times, and I asked the founder, how do you put up with this? How come you just don't quit? And he said, every time they reject me, I see it as a challenge, and they're testing me. How tenacious am I? How resilient am I? And once I absorbed that, it's a different mindset. So there's a lot of work to do. And, I think I could have done more in the US.
Karolina, you're the first check-in quite often, aren't you? So are you finding that lonely still, or are you finding quite a lot of people either to co-invest or squeezing you out of excellent opportunities?
We like to syndicate, to be honest, but also from the board perspective, when I'm on the board and it's a few other investors with experience, it really helps to drive the company, and you have mature conversation to steer the business and help the company to progress. So I think it's important. So for us, it's really important to syndicate with right people. In terms of the first check-in, not necessarily we are first check-in, because like around a seat, so it's sometimes like companies, they have already small funds. Again, it is about the right opportunity. Maybe just to add, because sometimes like when I was on the other side, not necessarily I was aware of the fact that most of the VCs were very small teams, and in reality now I'm on a board of like 6 companies, and how many of new opportunities I can actually actually physically I can do due diligence and invest. So although we see a lot of opportunities, in reality it's not like I will do a lot of like deals this year, taking into account that I'm quite full in terms of the portfolio already. So we look for opportunity, but it is about like syndication, collaboration, and meeting people in the right much earlier and having that conversation. And maybe just to follow on Robin, a point, because like at the end of the day, like as a founder, like I have to educate myself relatively quickly. What's your USP and the story, and potentially educate you what they might be a gap for our fund. Because now later I have to go back to my team, educate them, and then like educate our IC about why this is the right way. So it's actually it's a whole process. So that's why it's good to build a relationship with founders earlier, and then like I don't want to say work together, but like sort of work together on a proposal that hopefully will work for both sides when it comes to for me to pitch internally your proposal to our IC. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you.
Hi, Aline Charpentier from Brentwood SciTech. Just linking back to the topic of today, metabolic diseases, the sandstorm of GLP-1s and other, just to get your view on how much you've seen anything related to that. Are you seeing a flurry of metabolic solutions, health tech, therapeutics for other, and which one you believe in as an investors, maybe?
Excellent. I'm not answering that one. So,
Karolina. I can start because it's actually a good question because my PhD was in GLP-1, so like my whole PhD thesis was like on GLP-1, and like I have to say that it wasn't like we got drugs, like we got good paper at the time, but it wasn't so trendy. And now for past like a year, like 18 months, I'm getting so many of like GLP-1 opportunities, which is quite interesting, but not necessarily I would say that they are like something novel or unique. Which is, you can see the trend, where the trend is coming from, and like, yeah, it is interesting. We haven't invested in GLP-1 yet.
Robin, probably not. Oh.
So it's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of it unless you'd asked that question. But actually, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've been approached by 2 really, really small biotechs. One in the US, one in Europe. Both interested in our inhibitor. Would we work with them? And actually, they are, diseases of aging, senescence. So I think people do go where they think the money goes. I mean, we went with ADCs because that was useful. So I think, I am seeing a little bit of that.
Right. Any more questions? Okay. Something I'm quite interested in, and I think the US context is very different, and maybe in the Asian context as well, is the CDMOs. The organisations which can work with startup and scale-up communities and ideally use their experience, use their network, use their facilities in order to accelerate or more confidently bring things through the development cycle. And I guess I've struggled to see that really mature or grow in the UK. We don't seem to have UK champions of that. And therefore, do any of you have experience of working within that market? And is there anything we need to be doing to improve it, or am I just looking in the wrong places? Robin, I might start with you, whether you've...
Well, we're currently preclinical, our first program. We're an ADC company. It's a complex modality. There's an obvious integrated CDMO to go to if you're risk and time averse. So, we've done that. But we do work with a very internationally recognized expert CDMO, CRO going into CDMO. We do a lot of work with them. But I think, my view as a CEO, I'm responsible for trying to avoid risks, right? I'm trying to maximize return for the investors and avoid risks. So why do something new? So it's sort of, why would I go with an up-and-coming, promising but unproven CDMO? So why wouldn't I go? So there's that sort of like...
There's an incumbency power.
There is, so, it's quite hard to overcome, actually. So I've become quite risk-averse. The more we believe in our science. But
and then do you have much more confidence that the IP risk is hugely managed, that in fact you are working with an organisation which has multiple partners, and therefore they are driven by integrity and the opportunity to develop that. Because I guess IP leakage is a concern as you go through the early stages.
I guess I lose sleep about current real risks rather than hypothetical risks. I wouldn't sleep at all if I worried about it.
Right, fair enough. Good. Any more questions before I go back to my backup list? One here. Thank you.
The CDMOs are done at scale, so I'm not sure the UK is an easy place to win the argument to be number one on scale alone. So that's just my bias.
There's a land development opportunity in Speak, which you could do something really quite big.
Sure.
I think. So.
Hobby project.
Maybe just a bit of a fun one, but understanding what makes a successful startup yourself, what has deterred you perhaps from starting your own company? And yeah, what lessons from that can you share with the rest of us?
So when I was 25, I tried to start a company. I think I worked with one of you guys. And that was like, I started 2 companies. One went well, one didn't. Well, not really. It just was kind of like I was able to sustain on one. And the reality of those 2 years, 2-3 years, trying to get something off the ground was very humbling. So it's something I think about when we speak to a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm like, wow, these people have succeeded like far beyond what I did, like 10 years ago now. So it's just something I think it's important for investors to remember how hard it is to get a business off the ground. Then there's a bunch of do's and don'ts that we see hundreds of businesses. So I can go into more specifics, but maybe I'll leave it to you guys.
I think for me, it's phase of life. I have 2 young children, and I know that being an entrepreneur requires, 100% of everything, weekends, nights, committing your entire life to, building your company and building your team. But that said, I think our job is way easier than an entrepreneur's. It's way easier than an entrepreneur's would ever be. And so I think the risk reward at some point could make sense. But I think understanding what a job of the entrepreneurs in our portfolio are, there's no way I could do what they do.
I tried to set up one company, it didn't work. The timing didn't really work with diagnostic business. And then set up digital health company, helped to raise money, first money. We set up actually first clinical trials device thing at Imperial with the prof at Imperial, which is like she really helped us a lot, to be honest. And then the company needed different CEO, different skills. So I moved to VC. In terms of my role, it's actually interesting because I'm involved in a couple of companies on more like a company building and strategy. So one antibody company, we basically with another fund, we put a little bit of money with, and we sort of like support the business really from the idea. So we're quite close. With another one, it's the genomics platform. I actually know the space quite well, and I knew founders, so they sort of allowed me to be more involved in terms of like strategy bits. So I think it's interesting to be on I guess depending on the firm and the fund, but currently my role is quite diverse, and like I'm involved in different businesses, different business models, which is really interesting, I'd say.
It reminds me of one of my favourite overheard at Imperial. So 2009, 2010, when the major US banks stopped hiring because of the global financial crisis, suddenly the Imperial community decided they no longer wanted to work in those banks. They wanted to be startup founders. And I was in the electrical engineering cafe, and there were these 3 kids, and they were going in unbelievable detail into the pre-valuation of their first round, how long it was going to take them to go from the first round to the second round, when they were going to bring in which sort of capital, etc., etc. They had their spreadsheets, they were working through it. It was unbelievably hard work, and they were really committed to it. they were there for 30 minutes going through all of this, and then they finished it really happy with how they'd worked out their future plan. And then they say, yeah, we really must come up with an idea. So I think if you don't have the idea, then it's much easier to be an investor. Right, one last question, and then I think we're time, aren't we? So I'm not going to be belled. So.
In these two panels earlier, a lot was said about kind of prevention, early intervention, detect the diseases, etc., and act on this. But from the business perspective, it's actually quite a tough business to be in. So I think my question to you guys investing, how do you invest in such businesses which are preventive in nature? What do you look into this? What can you advise people thinking about starting such ventures?
We'll go down the panel, and then that will be it. So, Karolina.
It's going back to like your USP and really educating me on who is your client eventually, and who is your customer and who pays for it. So if we think about like diagnostic companies or like digital health, again, probably like those guys, they know more about health tech, but it will come back to the customer, and then and it will be the revenue model of like how quickly it will take you to get a customer. If we are going back to like traditional diagnostics, usually to develop traditional diagnostics wet lab assay, it takes almost the same time like when you build a biotech company, and then like in terms of R&D and cost and time. So then it's about the awards later on, and this is sort of like VC hat-on thing.
Dinika.
I actually think preventative care is one of the most backable areas in healthcare today, because if you think about the incentives of our healthcare systems that are all overstretched, the only way that our healthcare systems will be able to withstand the pressure is through, I would say, private sector investing in preventative care in some way, shape, or form. So we're actually seeing very interesting ideas selling to very scary buyers, for example, like the NHS, as a buyer group that's typically not very attractive to VCs. However, when you think about the ROI case of NHS funding going into preventative care solutions, or even large insurance companies as potential buyer groups who are very excited about preventative care, then it becomes, much more compelling. But for us, we always think about the commercial use case. And for me, the commercial use case of preventative care solutions across the board is more compelling now than ever.
Matt?
Yeah, I don't know how to say this, but I get almost terrified when I see, like, we're going to prevent X, Y, Z disease, because it's the hardest thing to do, like by far, is to get people or patients to diagnose or screen for something that they don't have, or potentially identify something early. So there's a huge part of it, which is prevention, is a huge consumer behavior change. And some companies we've backed in the space have had to completely change like the consumer journey. So the tools are much more engaging, they're gamified, and they have awesome neuromarkers in them, but it's completely changed the consumer side of prevention. Then to be able to do prevention at a distribution level, some companies have had amazing new business models to distribute through pharmacies, for example, or change the point of care and so on. So, but again, it has to be a big change in like how things work today to be able to enable that prevention. It's not going to be like we have any diagnostics, we're just going to pay, people are going to use us at for early intervention. There has to be either like a big change in like the tools that people and patients use, or the distribution, or regulatory, and you become like the front, the first line of care, and but it has to be something very disruptive on one of those fronts to be backable, because it's the hardest thing to crack, from my view.
Robin.
I was listening with interest.
Indeed,
I've got nothing to add.
Getting people to wash their hands, apparently, will be
Sorry?
Getting people to wash their hands, apparently, will be a good place to start. We'll try and manage that. Right, thank you, everybody. I think we are done as a panel. Hopefully you will share my appreciation for the panel. I think you've given us some great questions, and